Welcome to another episode of Software Explorations, Concepts and Overviews, hosted by yours truly, Tech Coach Ralph, where we are engineered to win. In the last episode, we started reviewing and comparing Selenium WebDriver, Cypress.io, and Playwright to see which is the right automation tool that we should be learning in the year of 2024. So we are going to jump into part two, where we are going to be breaking down the different tools, the different features of these softwares, and we will jump into that. So without further ado, let's get right back into it on the Lambda test. So like I said, the link to this blog post will be in the description where you can read it for yourself or follow along. All right, so now let's get into why we're here. Comparing Playwright versus Selenium versus Cypress, right? Below are a few points for comparing Playwright versus Cypress versus Selenium. So installation and configuration. In this section, we'll take a look at how to install and configure each of these tools and what benefits they offer in terms of installation and setup. So we're going to run through this. We're not going to spend too much time on it. But when comparing Playwright versus Selenium versus Cypress, the installation and configuration, Playwright is easy to install and set up. There are different ways to install Playwright, some of which are explained right below. So here are some basic prerequisites for Playwright, right? You need to have Node.js installed. You need to have a code editor. This person is using Visual Studio Code. I would, depending on which language I'm using, if I'm using JavaScript, I'd be using WebStorm. You know, I like using JetBrains products. Or if I'm using Python for Playwright, then I'd probably be using PyCharm, right? But it is what it is. So there are two ways of installing the Playwright: using VS Code extension, using the init command. Using the VS Code extension, let's say you create a folder, install Playwright, open the folder in VS Code, search Playwright extension in VS Code, and install it. Very simple. Or you can do a command. So this is this is a step for installing it in VS Code. We're not going to go through it all. Or you can do the init command, which npm init playwright at latest to get the latest version. And this pretty much how. So and it's going to ask you like some configurations. Do you want it to do in TypeScript or JavaScript? You choose the one that you prefer, the language of your choice, and you just go through the setup. We're not going to read exactly through it. We can do that on a live stream at some point, which we did, right? So you can definitely check out the live stream that we did previously on Playwright, right? And if you want to know more about the setup, you can check out this link here. Like I said, the link to this article will be in the description. So now we get to the beast, how to install Selenium. So to set up Selenium, we usually need to follow the steps below. It applies. This applies to the local Selenium grid. The steps below are also applicable to Python and other Selenium supported languages. Installation of Selenium grid and server is not applicable for cloud Selenium grids like Lambda test, right? So you're gonna see the challenges of setting up Selenium because, like I said, like Playwright was super easy. You can either do it through VS Code or you can just do a few commands for npm. What is it? npm init playwright at latest, and then you got Playwright set up. Now let's take a look at how to do it with Selenium, right? So first and foremost, this article is going to be talking about doing it through Java, right? So you're going to have to install Java. If you're doing it through Python, you're going to have Python installed, and you're going to have to go and install the Java JDK. That part right there is a bit like that already gets complicated for people who are new to QA and trying to get into the field, because especially if you're trying to get into automation, because like Java is not a easy thing to get into, So now if you're just trying to get into automation and the first thing they're telling you is, oh, you need to install Java, the JDK, you're like, oh, right, this is getting a little bit complicated, right? And then you need to install an IDE, right? You can you can either do Eclipse or you can do IntelliJ. Like I mentioned, I like JetBrains products. So I would go with IntelliJ. I have that installed on my computer, as you've seen in the past. But you can use Eclipse. I haven't used Eclipse probably in the past 10 years, right? But I'm sure they have some enhancements to it as well. So maybe this year we'll try to look at Eclipse as well, or maybe not. We'll see, right? So then after you do that, you need to download the Selenium WebDriver and the Java client driver to be set up in Eclipse. So that's like so you'd either download a package, a jar file for Selenium. I would probably just do it through test and G. Not TestNG. I'd probably just do it through Maven. Maven would be a good repo manager to set that up, so you don't have to go managing local jar files on your computer. But then that's another learning curve as well, right? So definitely, as we can see, the learning curve for setting up Selenium is a lot steeper. Create a TestNG project and run the Selenium test scripts. You can learn more about it through this blog on creating TestNG projects in Eclipse, right? So as you can already see, it is a lot. Like there's like four different steps where you have to go externally to set up Selenium. While when we looked at Playwright, it's just either do it through VS Code or do one command, and you have it installed. You can get to go. You're good to go, right? So now let's jump into Cypress. In Cypress, installation is super easy. The good thing about Cypress is that it has a folder structure. Just follow the folder structure and start developing the test cases using a predefined folder structure. You can develop the framework for your project. To set up Cypress, follow the steps. Prerequisites: Node should already be installed, right? So get Node installed, not that hard to do. Generate package.json using the npm init. Then npm install Cypress save dev command installs the latest version of Cypress at the time of writing this blog. So at the time this blog was written, the latest version of Cypress was 12.2. Once Cypress is installed, package.json looks like the one attached below. So you'll have Cypress with the version in there, and you're good to go. All right. Once the setup is done, open the Cypress, which will open with all default .spec files. Right. So it comes with these spec files, like I mentioned, right, where you can start looking and see, okay, you can use it as a template to model your stuff after. The spec files are the actual tests that are going to be executed. So I would say definitely get familiar with that. So to perform end-to-end testing with Cypress, follow the blog on Cypress end-to-end testing. Like I said, the link to this article will be posted in the description. So you can either follow along or read it for yourself so you can get started, right? So Runner, right? Runner is a tool that you can use to execute tests. After executing the test cases, you can view and export the test execution results, right? So Playwright has its runner, and it has the adaptability to operate within third-party runners such as Playwright, Test, Jasmine, AVA, Mocha, Test, and multiple browsers. You can connect Playwright to your current JavaScript test runner with a few lines of code. Playwright Test, Jess and Jasmine. So I'm not going to read into all of these. You can definitely read this for yourself, but this is the different ways that you can be executing your tests, right? To run your tests. In Playwright, we can run a single test or a set of tests or all test cases by default. Test cases are run in headless mode. Test cases are run in the terminal, and results can only be seen in the terminal. Below are the commands that we can use to run tests, right? So these are how to run tests. And I would say because that everything is run in the terminal, that would be a +1 for Cypress and for Selenium, because although you can run Selenium in headless mode, you can also, but by default, it's going to use the browser on your computer to run and stuff like that, right? Let's see. So, but you can also run it in headed mode where so the default is running in headless, but you can have it run in headed mode where it'll open up the browser and do all of that stuff for you. Let's see. In Playwright, you can run the test case in debug mode. Playwright has a built-in tool, Playwright Inspector, which permits you to step via Playwright API calls, see their debug logs, and explore selectors. The Playwright Inspector also helps in finding locators. We can find the locator by hovering over the element during the inspection, right? And I'll tell you this, like I've mentioned this in the past, having the right locators for your test is super, super important, right? it's what makes or breaks your test. So you definitely want to make sure that you have the right locators for your test. All right. Okay, let's jump down. All right, so let's go to Selenium. Right, Selenium Runner is a command line. Selenium Runner is a command line tool that allows you to run Selenium scripts. There are several runners available for Selenium, each with its own set of features and capabilities. Below is a list of a few runners normally used to run Selenium tests. So there's Selenium WebDriver. Selenium WebDriver, it's like you'll be running a particular test locally on your computer. It allows you to automate web browser actions such as clicking on elements, filling out forms, navigating between pages. The Selenium Grid, this runner allows you to run your Selenium scripts on a remote machine or in the cloud. Like I mentioned, you can do AWS. Device farm, you can do it, and you can create your own grid using the AWS EC2 instances. Maybe we'll do that this year as well. You can run it on Sauce Labs, Browser Stack, so many different places that you can run the Selenium test. As long as there is a Selenium server or Selenium node and a Selenium hub, you can point your test to that, right? And then there's TestNG. This is the popular testing framework used with Selenium. This is a popular testing framework used with Selenium. It allows you to create test cases, define test suites, and support running tests in parallel, right? I like this, like you with Java, this is the one that I am most familiar with. I started off using TestNG, and that's been the runner that I've been most popular with. Even when you're using the Selenium Grid to run your tests, you can still use the TestNG to power it. TestNG is so powerful, and it's not limited to Selenium, right? TestNG can it can work for anything that you're doing in testing for QA, right? JUnit is another popular testing framework used with Selenium. It allows you to create tests, define test suites, and support running tests in parallel. So JUnit is what developers would traditionally use for their unit testing. They could use TestNG, but they highly favor JUnit. The two are very similar. To me, TestNG adds a little bit more feature, which is more conducive for QA engineers who are writing automated tests. And then there is Jenkins for continuous integration. I've used Jenkins many times. It is a continuous integration tool that allows you to run your Selenium tests. It automates the build, test, and deployment process and supports running. And then there's Jenkins that I've used many times. It is a continuous integration tool that you can run your Selenium test. It automates the build, test, and deployment process and supports running tests in parallel. Maven, which I mentioned earlier, this is a build automation tool that can be used to manage your Selenium test. It allows you to define dependencies, build and test your code, and manage the deployment process, right? And to me, using Maven, it makes it a lot easier. There's a learning curve. It's definitely a learning curve with Selenium, right? It is a lot harder to learn Selenium than it is to learn the other tools. However, if it's what's still most in demand, then you might have to bite the bullet and go with Selenium, because using Maven, using TestNG, using Jenkins, those are still very popular, right? So it all depends, all right? All right. So there's cloud testing tools like Lambda Test can be used as a test case runner to execute automated tests on a variety of different operating systems, browsers, and devices. With Lambda Test, you can run end-to-end automated tests using Selenium on a safe, dependable, and scalable Selenium infrastructure. This can help users to ensure that their websites and applications are compatible with a wide range of different platforms and devices to identify and fix any issues that may arise. Using Lambda Test, you can automate cross-browser testing on more than 3,000 distinct operating systems and browsers with Selenium scripts, which leads to greater test coverage and significantly quicker build times, right? So, and Lambda Test, they do that. Sauce Labs does that. Browser Stack does that. AWS Device Farm does that. Maybe we will take a exploration through Lambda Test to see how that works, and we can get some insight on that as well. That would be a pretty cool thing to take on. Always exploring new automation tools. All right, so now let's jump into the Cypress runner. So Cypress has a test runner where we can see the executing commands apart from that, in Cypress, you can see the application under test with real-time data, which is really cool. Using Cypress Runner, you can see the change in UI after hovering over the log and in the log command. All right, so very cool, very detailed. All right. So record and playback. When comparing Playwright versus Selenium versus Cypress, most tools typically have a record and playback feature, which is quite beneficial for first-time users. Yeah, it is beneficial for first-time users. You can change an existing test, record new tests, and run recorded steps using the record and playback tool. All three tools, i.e. Playwright, Selenium, and Cypress, include record and playback, which are described more in depth below. All right. So in Playwright, you will need to generate the code for user interactions. You can use the code gen to generate the actions we will perform in the browser. Playwright will generate the code for the user action performed. You can use the Playwright. You can use the below command to open the Playwright inspector. In the below screenshot, you can see code is generated when you click on the home, blog, and mega menu link. All right. So that's for sure. So I think that's a little bit disingenuous, right? Because like in order to do the record and playback in Selenium, you need to use the Selenium IDE, but I highly don't recommend that. It gives you like the worst selectors possible, and I generally don't recommend record and playback in general, right? Because it's going to give you a false sense of security, and then it selects the worst selectors for you, and then your tests are breaking all over the place, and you are not going to be happy. But we have Selenium IDE to record playback and code in Selenium. Selenium IDE does not need any additional setup before usage other than installing the plugin in your browser. It does not require any programming logic to develop its test scripts, unlike Selenium WebDriver and RC. Instead, you may only record your browser interactions to create tests. The playback option can be used to rerun the test scenario, right? So that's all I'm going to talk about it. To me, it's not really worth it. You can read more into it if you want, but I think that you'll be hurting yourself more if you were to try to get into the Selenium IDE, right? I tried it a long time ago and I did not find it worth it. And then we have Cypress. We can use Cypress Studio to capture the test cases in Cypress by capturing interactions with the application being tested. Cypress Studio offers a visual approach to developing tests within Cypress. Cypress Studio provides a visual approach to create tests within Cypress by recording the interactions against the application under test. When interacting with the DOM inside the Cypress Studio, the type, click, check, uncheck, and select Cypress commands are available and will produce test code. So to enable Cypress Studio, we have to do the below setting, and then experimental studio true. Okay, all that, and add new test, and you can go ahead and click around and stuff like that. It will add your test for you. Yeah, so you can read more into that if you want, but let's keep going. In the next section of this blog on Playwright versus Selenium versus Cypress, we will learn about the different ways to select elements in Playwright, Selenium, and Cypress. All right, so let's jump into this real quick. So element selection is a way where we filter out all elements with a given tag in document and make sure the element you are making assertions is attached from the DOM. We have different types of tags like ID, CSS, class, attribute, tag name, link text, name attribute, and we can make a whole video on this, right? So in Playwright, we have to auto-wait. We have an auto-wait concept that makes the command fast and the test case execution fast, right? In Selenium, you do have to kind of program it, the wait times and everything like that. It can be quite confusing, quite challenging. Playwright auto waits for all the relevant checks to pass. Once these checks pass, these then only perform the requested action. All right, so that's pretty cool that it's built in. Let's see. So there's a list of the different things that it can do. And so let's keep going. So Selenium web elements in Selenium are used to interact with DOM elements. We normally use different types of locators mentioned above to connect with the page's elements. Sometimes when we search for the element, we assume that the element will already be loaded onto the page. In my opinion, this is one of the biggest Selenium's limitations, which I agree with this with the person writing the article. That is a huge limitation of Selenium. As a result of the test frequently failing after repeated attempts to find an element, we must start loading the element with implicit or explicit weights to avoid flakiness. So yeah, that is, I definitely agree. That is one of the most challenging and annoying parts of Selenium. But you can build this stuff into the framework, but it can make the test run a lot slower, right? To avoid failure of the test, we check whether the element is available in the DOM. So using something like this, they're using like presence of element located. So I'm very familiar with this, right? So now in Cypress, it says, in the case of Cypress, things are the opposite. As interactions of elements are done through the locators, is a built-in wait mechanism in Cypress, which makes the execution of the test much more stable and decreases the flakiness during the execution. This duration is configured by the default command timeout option, which has a default of 4,000 milliseconds. This means that when acting on the element, Cypress will wait up to 4 seconds to move to the next command. You will get an error message if the element is not loaded within the default time. We can increase the default timeout from the Cypress config file, right? So you can change that from 4 milliseconds to 10,000, so from 4,000 milliseconds to 10,000 milliseconds, right? Cypress automatically pauses for the network call to complete before moving forward. The next command in the below command of Cypress, for every command, Cypress will wait 4 seconds. So it'll wait 4 seconds for to click this button. It'll wait 4 seconds for focus. It'll wait 4 seconds to click on welcome. All right. So let's jump over to language and browser support. So like we mentioned, Playwright supports Python, Java, JavaScript, .NET. Playwright has the full support of all modern web browsers that include Google, Chrome, Microsoft Edge with Chromium, Safari with WebKit, and Firefox. Selenium now is a suite of tools that enable automated testing for web applications. It supports various programming languages, including Java, Python, C#, Ruby, and JavaScript. You can use any of these languages to write your Selenium test scripts. So based on the needs of your team and your company, you can choose which language you would be writing your scripts in, right? And then you can run them on various browsers, including Google Chrome, Mozilla Firefox, Internet Explorer, Microsoft Edge, Safari, and I think they still have support for Opera. I'm not 100% sure. Don't quote me on that, right? Selenium also provides support for headless browsers, which allows you to run your tests without actually launching the web browser window, which is pretty cool. To use Selenium with particular programming languages and web browser, you must install the appropriate language binding and WebDriver. These will allow you to interact with the browser and perform actions such as navigating a web page, clicking on elements, and entering text. So we're not going to jump into the example, but so now for Cypress. Cypress is a JavaScript-based end-to-end testing tool designed to work with web applications. As a result, it is primarily designed to work with web pages and applications written in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. It is compatible with all modern web browsers, including Google Chrome, Firefox, Microsoft Edge, and Safari. But as it says here, you can only do this with JavaScript. You're not going to be able to use Python, Java, .NET, or anything like that. So keep that in mind. Parallel execution. It is a crucial feature for automating web browsers as it allows you running multiple tests simultaneously, thus reducing the overall execution time. When it comes to parallel testing, Playwright, Selenium, and Cypress are popular choices among developers. In comparison, we will take a look at how each of these tools handle parallel testing. So let's jump in this real quick. And there you have it. That concludes part 2 of our software explorations, where we are reviewing Selenium.web, where we are reviewing Selenium WebDriver compared to Cypress.io and to Playwright. We will be going live, where we will be setting up. We'll be doing a side-by-side comparison to implementing each of these tools, Selenium, Cypress, and Playwright, and we will be doing it on the same website to see which one is easier to set up, which one is easier to use, and go from there. And I would highly recommend that you tune in for that and you follow along, because if you can learn, to me, I don't think that you should pick one over the other. You should have a base understanding and foundation of all of them because you will make yourself more marketable, more available for the different opportunities that present themselves because you don't want to have a job that's saying, "Oh, we're hiring for Cypress. Oh, I only know Selenium." You might be on the outside looking in. So know enough so that you can ramp up to whichever one that you need. So that is the plan. If you enjoyed this video, right, the software explorations, then go ahead and subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you can know every time that we drop new content or that we go live. Like the video, share it with a friend. Check out the Patreon at www.techcoachralph.dev. And of course, as always, leave me a comment. Let me know what you thought about the video, about the information, if you found it helpful, if there is something that you think is missing, leave me some feedback. I am open to it all. But until next time, until next week, where we will be concluding this 3-part series on the best automation software to learn for 2024. I will see you then, but definitely tune into the live stream tomorrow night where we'll be comparing the 3, all right? But until next time, this is Tech Coach Ralph with another episode of Software Explorations, signing off.
If you enjoyed the fascinating information shared in this video and you want more, be sure to hit the subscribe button to Tech Coach Ralph to be notified for new videos.